Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So this video is about setbacks. I'm actually going to read an article or a letter that was written that I found online. Someone had posted in a group about setbacks, and I think it's just really well written. I think it's very important information for people to know. And so I'm actually going to read through that article in this video, and I just want everyone to hear it because I just was really comforted by it, I guess, because I know that this is a part of the process and this can happen to people and does happen to people who are recovering. Even though I feel mostly recovered, I've talked about it before, I do suffer with setbacks because I am still sensitive, especially to medications and any kind of pharmaceutical. So I recently went through a steroid setback, and this information in here is it just sums up really well what that journey is like going through a setback, how it is a normal part of most people's recoveries. And yeah, but before I get into it, I wanted to mention that I am doing one-on-one supportive coaching. So if you're looking to talk to someone one time or ongoing who's been through the absolute hells of psychiatric drug adverse reactions and recovery, then and if you want to chat with me, I will leave my booking link in the description of this video. You'll notice that my rates are quite a bit lower than other places you might find online. And so I wanted to give everyone access to chat with someone who's been through it if they need that. And I also have a website. So if you want to check out my website that goes into more of my story and into more of my background as well, then I will list that in the description as well. If you want to ask me a single question, I will put my email address there. Please just limit it to one question only, as I just don't have time lately to go through lengthy emails and to have long conversations back and forth through email. So if you're looking to have multiple questions answered or you want to chat in more length, then I encourage you to book a free 15-minute consultation or a 30-minute or 60-minute call. So on to the video now. So this is from Matt Semet. I'm not sure how you say his last name. He is someone who wrote this article for Mad in America. And like I said, or maybe I didn't say, I came across this article in one of the groups, and I just think it's really quite powerful and well written and applies to many, if not most or all people going through this journey. So bear with me. I am going to read through it, like I said, just because I think it's powerful, and I will put the link to this letter in the description as well, in case you want to read it or have it saved on your computer somewhere, just to remind you or just to encourage you or comfort you if you are going through a setback, or, you know, if you're new to this and you're not really familiar how this journey might go or might look for you, it might not, then here we go. I am going to read it. So here's what it says. Will I be able to have a drink again with friends? What about weed? How about coffee? I really miss my morning coffee. Do you eat lots of refined sugar now? I miss dessert and sugary snacks. I miss chocolate. How about violent or horror movies, or do you get overstimulated? Can you take an aspirin? What about cold medicine? Can you push yourself super hard exercising or work really long days without repercussions? Could you ever take another benzo, say if you had to go for a surgical procedure? What about pain medication? What about cigarettes? Are those off limits? Over the years, I've had people going through psychiatric medicine tapers, washout, or withdrawal ask me these and similar questions. Some of these are certainly questions I've had for myself as I've fought my way back to normal life, back to that delicious calm and ease of living we in good health take for granted. After losing my way for many years due to psychiatric drugging and chemical addictions, I've come to believe that the big issue with med withdrawal is that it causes a light years beyond discomfort, horror movie overexcitation that won't, not for one instant, let you forget your existence. Your second-to-second reality comprises a seemingly unending hell with no pause button, only the occasional relief of sleep. You are in so much pain on every possible level that you simply cannot escape yourself, and so the pain looms larger like for it. I'm not sure if that's a typo. In the withdrawal/healing state, the symptoms are often so strong and the fear-racing, obsessive and tortured thoughts and inner torments so great that you are unable to enter that frictionless state, aka plain old life, in which you are simply acting, moving freely about the world as need and desire dictate, without the ball and chain of dread-infused self-awareness dragging you into the abyss. Without being so persistently aware of your existence that you also can't stop from ruminating about its antithesis, death. Distraction helps a little, but only for so long. I often felt like my very shadow was chasing me, leaving nowhere to run. As soon as I paused, even for a microsecond, the withdrawal storm was back on me like a pack of snarling dogs. Worse yet, insomnia and fatigue had sapped my energy stores, yet if I tried to rest because I simply could not take another step, the symptoms crowded in to fill the stillness. I felt like a shark that must always keep swimming or it will drown. The experience was in every sense an existential trap. You look at other people not tormented as you are and wonder how they live so casually, so fluently. What secret do they know that I don't? Their world seems alien, a realm of the gods and superheroes, a paradise unobtainable. Just go to grocery shopping or throw a frisbee in the park or smile at a child would take more energy and courage than you could ever imagine conjuring. Occasionally you hit one of those rare windows of calm, and you can, in the contrast, see how withdrawal has warped your picture of the world. Then, discouragingly, the symptoms return to push you back into a terrified and frenzied thought storm. Oh shit, not this again. Yet life goes on and you must keep moving as best you can, so you learn to operate by a new physics. It often takes force of will and sometimes literally physically maneuvering yourself in some unnatural way to accomplish even the simplest task. You dwell in inertia. In florid benzo SSRI mood stabilizer withdrawal, my thoughts oozed like molasses, thick, clotted, unnatural, foreign, frightening. I often couldn't breathe properly due to what felt like a bloated belly, an iron straitjacket sheathing my torso. An electric current surged through my gut and spine, and my muscles were on fire from the crown of my head to the tips of my fingers and toes. I could neither cry nor laugh, so bound up was I with hyperventilating rigidity, so frozen were the muscles of my face. Amidst this near paralysis, when I needed to access a thought, say, I need to take out the garbage, and convert it into action, a sluggish disconnect stalled the message's transfer between brain and body. I would have to actively conjure instructions for myself, as if using the manual to put together an IKEA dresser. Okay, I'm going to reach down to this little pail, bring into the kitchen, turn it upside down over the big trash can, and then take the liner out of the bin and carry it out to the alley. Step by step, I would accomplish each task, slowly, unsurely, my body stiff and sweaty. Instead of enchaining these actions as one continuous flow, I moved like a robot staccato, pondering every movement, then taking seconds to actualize what once used to occur unconsciously in a fraction of that time. Completely conscious at every turn of my existence, but never in a reassuring, mindful way, as with the grounding of your body to the earth through your feet while meditating, or stopping to savor the sweetness of an apple. More like the awareness of each in-breath a man has while being waterboarded. There is no peace. That is the heart of the matter. There will be no peace until you pass a certain threshold with your healing. Now, I did get better from all this almost entirely, and enough so that I didn't have to think about it anymore. It was mostly not on my radar. The dread, the existential panic, the body dipped in cement disappeared. I have enjoyed for many years the luxury of taking my existence for granted because it has not been a torment to me. But there have been setbacks, bad decisions, or unforeseen stressors, or just the randomness of neuronal healing that have plunged me back into the aforementioned state. Which, as you might gather, sucks. If you're like me, when you have a setback, your first thought is probably going to be, what if this time it's permanent? And I don't know if I have the strength to deal with this again. And F this. As I write this, I'm after 2 long and toxic months gradually, yet also erratically, on the mend from a setback that began in late July. Oddly enough, it had occurred to me over this past year as I've been writing these essays for Mad in America that maybe I was too healthy to speak to the withdrawal experience with authenticity, to have street cred. Maybe too much time had passed since I'd been at the crux to recall what it was like, to put these essays into their proper context, to have the proper empathy for people early in their healing, their wounds still raw, to shuffle a mile in their shoes, usually as quickly as possible from their psychiatric tormentors. Perhaps I'd had too many good years in a row, my body strong again, taking normal life for granted to have an honest recollection. However, it's not a moot point. I've had a chance to live with full-bore 100% benzo/antidepressant/mood stabilizer withdrawal symptoms again, 7 years after taking my last psychotropic. It sucks big time, but that's just how it is, a reality I've somewhat been able to accept. I write this not to scare people, but to point out some mistakes I made along the way that contributed to this setback, so that others might avoid them. And also to emphasize that I have been healing in a matter of months this time, instead of years, as grim as the experience has been. This was, I now see, all very predictable. I'd been drinking way too much coffee, and my consumption had been escalating for years despite my best efforts to rein it in. The deadline-driven nature of the editorial work I do often means brief periods of epic 12 and 14-hour days for which you need to remain up and alert. By this summer, each morning began with a quad espresso, moved to a Dr. Pepper or double shot at lunch, and whenever I needed a bump, I'd turn to chocolate-covered espresso beans or dark chocolate. I could drink a double shot at 5 p.m. and still sleep 8 hours that night. I know, don't say it, that was excessive. Paradoxically, only the morning caffeine woke me up. The other infusions were oddly sedating, and I ended up nodding off by afternoon. Something very strange was going on. I was also eating way too much refined sugar. The only fruit I'd have was the occasional handful of blueberries with my son. I had the nutrition of a jacked-up Red Bull teenager in my 40s. Meanwhile, I was continuing to push myself rock climbing in high summer, even though heat has been a trigger for past setbacks. It didn't matter, I figured. I'm 7 years out. I'll be fine. It's over. I also had a shoulder injury, a flaming red flag that should have been a clear signal to take time off. But I didn't. I couldn't. I wouldn't. I'd lost too many years flat on my back or writhing on the floor in benzo agony to sit on the sidelines ever again, so I pushed through. I took a small dose of painkillers at night for about 10 days just to sleep on my injured limb and then abruptly stopped. I'd taken opiates as prescribed on a couple occasions post-benzos for knee pain without any major adverse issues, despite a past history of addiction with these pills. But this time, for whatever reason, was different. This time I effed myself hard. All hell broke loose on a short trip to South Dakota, climbing 2 days in the swamping Midwestern heat with a friend. On day 2, on the hike up out of the little limestone canyon, the symptoms which had been building came rushing back in a giant tsunami. I couldn't breathe. It was like I'd walked into an invisible wall. On the 6-hour drive home, I felt like I'd been dosed with acid and fought back panic and tried to appear as normal as possible in front of my buddy as I clutched the steering wheel with desperate force. The symptoms have ranged from jitters to insomnia to the iron sheath to trouble breathing to anxiety to panic to derealization to a rigid neck and throat to fatigue, rubbery legs to a black depression, and of course the hopelessness that comes from being plunged back into hell having thought you'd finally escape, never to return. This wasn't anxiety, it wasn't depression. I felt like I'd been dosed with speed and LSD, assaulted by a pack of bat-wielding thugs, shot full of flu virus, contracted MS. There have been perhaps some elements of adrenal exhaustion or general stress/fatigue contributing, but the root problem has felt like the return of benzo withdrawal, even all these years later. It had lain dormant like a sleeping bear, then came roaring out of its cave after I so stupidly bumbled along and poked it with a stick. Clearly I was treating my body like crap, and clearly even without a sensitized nervous system I was headed for a blowout, and having endured setbacks before I should have been smarter, but I wasn't. The first month I was down to 3 hours of sleep a night, had to go up the stairs on hands and knees, and on a good day could only walk around the reservoir by our house, a 0.75-mile loop twice, shuffling, gasping, a far cry from my daily 5-mile walks with the dog. I had adrenaline spikes, panic attacks, sobbing fits, heavy legs, looping death and suicide thoughts, and bouts of fatigue that left me glued to the mattress. I often despaired over how my world had exploded, the pieces seemingly scattered too far and wide to ever be picked back up again and reassembled. I've often told people that I'm not sure if I'd have the strength to go through benzo withdrawal again. I believe this to be true until once again I've had no choice but to face the monster and realize I'd been wrong. It was just something I was saying. I actually do have the strength because just like before, I will not give in. Just like before, I will not end my life to end my suffering, and I will not, even at my most desperate, darkest hour, craving some quick fix for the pain, give back in to the meds or doctors that have taken so much already. Even if I spend the rest of my days a shuddering wreck, they are my days to spend here on earth. I am not going to let this thing or the heartless, broken mental health system win. Not before, not now, and not ever. If the only way through before was forward, then forward I shall go again. The good news is I'm slowly getting better thanks to the balm of time, to meditation, and to cleaning up my diet and getting off caffeine, which in my opinion has a profoundly horrible and way understated withdrawal syndrome. I believe that all along caffeine had been inflaming the underlying stuff until this final breaking point. Caffeine interacts with GABA receptors, the ones affected by benzos, so perhaps my body was relying on it in some bizarre way. It also releases dopamine as well as the fight or flight hormones adrenaline and cortisol. It is a stimulant and a psychotropic. But this has been the scariest setback of all because I was so far out time-wise. In my first few years off benzos, there were heat-induced summer funks that lasted 2 to 3 weeks, but at that point I could rationalize that I was still early in my healing. At other times, life or work stress conspired to lay me low, or I'd go a few too many nights with poor sleep and the symptoms would return. But in all these cases, I could point to a single discernible cause. In the past 3 or 4 years, I have considered myself mostly healed, almost impervious to setbacks, save those few weeks in summer, and even then I'd experienced symptoms at only about 50% intensity. There simply hasn't been any of the random bad spells, the waves I experienced during the first 3 years. Each time that I've experienced a setback, I have healed and felt stronger than before. I expect this time to be no different. In fact, I expect it to be my last major setback, as I now plan to take better care of my health. To, like the early days in Benzo withdrawal, scrutinize every last thing I eat, to listen to my body and not push too hard with exercise or stress, and to monitor my psychic output, eliminate negative thoughts and input, avoid negative people and negative media, so that my thinking is more centered, and to avoid caffeine and sugar. Let us hope this is the last of it. I write this not to scare people, but to present a reality. This reality has been difficult to accept, but the fact remains that my nervous system is more sensitive than before and might always be so, at least to some degree. I'm not the same man I once was, though this isn't necessarily a bad thing. As an integral person, I'm much tougher and more resilient, having survived psychiatric oppression. If something or someone smacks of control or manipulation or disingenuousness, I don't give it or them the time of day. However, on the level of pure neuronal function, there is a lingering sensitivity I'd do well to monitor. So perhaps you're wondering, once a year or 2 or 3 go off benzos or antidepressants or antipsychotics or whatever chemicals have been foisted on you, you will still have to be vigilant, or can you dive fully back into your old life again? Can you pound coffee or smoke weed or drink socially or have a stressful job or commute or eat foods with lots of MSG and not blow out, not have a setback? Can you overextend yourself physically or mentally or emotionally without incurring the wrath? I don't pretend to have the answer, you do. I mean, how important are certain of these things that you need to reintroduce them into your life to try to embrace or reclaim the old you? Are they important enough to risk a setback? Why not embrace the new you and make more judicious decisions that accommodate who you are now? Why not proceed slowly and with great caution back into any activity that's a potential trigger? Isn't this how life should work? Shouldn't we live according to who we are today? Psych med damage or not, we're all changing in one way or another up until the day we die, all aging and sagging and slouching toward our graves, battered this way and that by happenstance and fate, made more fragile with each step, each breath, each passing second. This is both the most wondrous and most terrifying thing about being human. We are simultaneously self-conscious and aware of our mortality, whether we live this truth accordingly or not. I once thought I had good, reliable answers to what happens as we heal, to how to live after benzos in a way that cultivates long-lasting health, but clearly I didn't. Clearly I was wrong. Clearly I let myself see only one part of the picture. As each day goes by, however, and I clutch and claw my way back to health, reclaiming the hard-fought gains already made, I think I'm coming closer to one version of the truth. So I know that was long, but I think it's really important because, I mean, I've talked about it before, about setbacks and how they're so discouraging and they can be so disheartening, especially if you've been feeling really well for a while or even a short while. If you've had, your first few windows and then you go into a setback, it can be really difficult to deal with. And I think he sums it up so well by talking about how it's almost instinctive that you ask yourself, is this the time that is permanent? Did I screw myself, one too many times now? My body's not going to forgive me anymore. And that's not the truth. It's just what your brain tells you when you go back into that state. I mean, I've experienced it several times. I've been really open about it and shared it, and it pretty much always has a trigger. So to me, the difference between waves and setbacks are waves are just a normal part of the healing process. It's like when you're recovering from anything, when it's grief or a physical injury, you have good days, you have bad days, things are more severe, less severe, but the trajectory is typically up. But a setback to me is often when you have a trigger. It's often chemical. It could be stress, it could be caffeine, it could be something neurotoxic like MSG, or maybe you become very sensitive to medications and you needed to have surgery, or you needed to have, I don't know, some dental procedures done, or you have an infection and you have to take antibiotics or steroids or whatever. Or maybe you don't have to take those, but that's what your doctor is recommending and you're not sure what to do. Or maybe you've explored natural options or least risky options or less risky options, and nothing's helping, and it's something maybe potentially serious, and you have to take something that will cause a setback. To me, that's a setback. And they can kind of put you back into what feels like acute, and it can be really difficult, but then you come out of it and you feel better. A wave is similar, but I don't personally think that waves need triggers. I think they just happen as a natural part of the neuronal healing, like he talks about. And maybe I should have put a trigger warning at the beginning of this video, but I just feel like people need to be made aware of this, because I almost think it's worse. Like in my first withdrawal, I wasn't aware of windows and waves. I wasn't aware of setbacks. It took me a long time to figure out that I was even suffering from withdrawal. I didn't know where my symptoms came from. And I was living really carelessly, and my symptoms got way, way better after 6 months. I felt healed, but then 6 months after that, I went right back into it full force. I don't remember at this point what I was doing, taking, but I know in general, I wasn't careful. I was still drinking and taking other medications and sleeping meds and all these things. And I think that probably contributed to me going back into it. But I was unaware. And so I feel like if I would have been made aware of setbacks and how they occur and how they're often a part of the healing process as much as like waves and windows are, I would have saved myself a lot of pain and suffering. Now, like I said, waves are not always avoidable. They happen, I think, as a natural part of this process, but setbacks often have a trigger. And so he talked about this, and a lot of people, that I've talked to have talked about this, where when you're feeling better, and this has been my experience as well, I don't like using the word careless. I don't think you're necessarily careless. You're a human being and you want to engage in life like the rest of the world does. And you just kind of forget about withdrawal, and you forget about drug damage or benzos or whatever. And you just start living your life. And then that can become a cumulative thing like he talked about. And then your body's like, wait, no, I'm not strong enough for that. And you go into a setback. And it's not something that you need to be like deathly afraid of, but it's something that I think you need to be prepared for. And he talks about how, this setback this far out just taught him once again, I've got to treat my body really, really well. I have to take the best care of myself possible. And that would be good for anybody, but most people aren't in enough pain to explore, what am I putting into my body that might be hurting it at a, deep level? And why do I feel just low level like crap all the time? And whereas us, we have way more heightened reactions. And so it kind of kicks us into gear to take better care of ourselves. And I've shared before in other videos where living as non-toxic as possible, avoiding as many neurotoxins, excitotoxins as possible, really was the key for myself to get better. So that was not just excluding caffeine, but like artificial sweeteners and being super careful with everything I put on and in my body, things that are known sort of toxic chemicals. I think all of that contributes to recovery, and I've been very open about that before. And how I've talked about is how I don't believe it's just a straight withdrawal. It has to do with toxicity levels. It has to do, I think, with gut health. It's multifaceted and multifactorial. And so I just thought he really summed up what it's like, especially if you're in a more protracted state. I know there's a lot of people who watch these who are in acute, and I don't know, maybe this is triggering for people in acute, but I also think it's good for those people to be prepared, because I think you can do things to prevent setbacks or to prevent them from being super bad. And so the earlier you know this, the better. But also for people who are protracted or quite protracted, I think it's a good reminder that, setbacks are a part of it. This person is healed now, but like setbacks they're like a natural part of it, just because you're human and you want to get back to living life. And it's not, I don't believe this is always going to be the case, but I've said before in my interview with Angie Peacock, I said, there's recovery and then there's strengthening the immune system or the nervous system. You go through this phase where you're like, or it could be a long phase. Like for me, it was several years where it's like, okay, I finally feel like I'm recovering. I do feel like my normal self a lot of the time, but I'm still very weak. My nervous system is still very shaky. And so I still have to be very careful with how I treat it. And I think the strengthening of the nervous system takes even longer. And so I think that's what he's talking about here, where, yeah, he was many years out and he was healed and living a full life, but his nervous system still wasn't strong and robust. And so he attributes to this setback to, you know, caffeine and pushing himself too much with work and exercise and heat and all those things. And that's a cumulative reaction. And so again, he didn't write this article to scare people, and I don't read it to scare people. I think it's just the more knowledge you can have, the better, and the more delicate and gentle you can be with your nervous system all throughout. You have to be less careful as time goes on, but and as time goes on, things are more cumulative. In the beginning, when you're more in acute, it's like one thing can just like trigger an increase in symptoms. But the further out you get, it takes more. And so you are strengthening along the way, but to become fully strong and robust, I think takes quite a long time. But you can live a full life long before your nervous system is fully strong. That's the case that I'm in. That's the part of the journey that I'm in. So anyway, I feel like I'm starting to ramble here, but let me know your thoughts on this in the comments, and what experiences you've had with setbacks, where you're at in the journey, whether you're acute, whether you're recovering, whether you're in a strengthening phase, wherever you are. And I hope you guys are doing well, and check out the article in the description, check out my website, and if you're interested in chatting, you can book an appointment with me. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.